Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and this week this is episode 48, recorded on May 29th. So it's springtime in the Finger Lakes. So get us back to where I belong there. I took a little trip this past weekend. I went down to the southern part of the state, and actually into northern New Jersey. And I'm going to show you a little picture there. This is a picture actually on the New York State Thruway down, in between Harriman and the Tappan Zee Bridge. That's what I'm trying to say, the Hudson River. And this mountain is called Ramapo Torn in the very southwestern part of Harriman State Park, Bear Mountain, Harriman State Park. And this is one of the first hikes I ever went on with my family back when I was about 12 years old in this rocky knob, and I always liked to look at this mountain because that's where my love of parks and hiking and all that sort of thing began many years ago. But this time, this week we're going to actually go near there. We're going to go to the Catskills. On the trip I was on Route 17, New York State Route, New York State Route 17. It took a bus this time because I was able to get to my destination that way very well. So views of the Catskills as we go out through the Route 17, the southwestern Catskills. The Delaware River starts up in the Catskills, at least part of it. And let's see, we get another view of it. This is I think a big tributary, one of the big tributaries, maybe Beaver Kill or something like that. It feeds the Delaware River coming out of the Kaaterskill Mountains. But just to see where the Kaaterskill Mountains are, you see the green area there. That's not the entire area of the Catskills, but that is the Catskill Park, or the Catskill Forest Preserve, and the Catskill Park is within that blue marked boundary there in the green area. And then just to the below that and to the left a little bit, right down to the border with Pennsylvania. That's a continuation of the Catskills in Sullivan County where the Route 17 goes, and the squiggly border on New York State there, between New York State and Pennsylvania, is actually the Delaware River. So let's zoom in on the Catskill Park a little bit. You can see there's some different areas that are different uses actually. One of the dark green, but not the darkest green, is wilderness area. The light green is wild forest, and then there are some intensive use areas. But in this show we're going to concentrate on sort of the upper right portion of the Catskill Park, and we'll go up there. Now you can see on the extreme right there of the park is a light green area, the wild forest area called Kaaterskill. So that's where we're going to spend most of our time. And then the area just above that, that's very dark green and has a couple of little blue spots in it, that's North Lake and South Lake Campground. So that will be mentioning that in the video. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go to a video that I made 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, of a visit to the Catskills, and has a lot of interesting landscape history and lore and so forth. I think you're going to enjoy it. So I'm going to put up this picture of the northeastern Catskills, which are bigger in general than the section, say you go down in Route 17, the Southern Tier Expressway goes through. Those are actually pretty lower portions of the Catskills, and as you'll see in the video, this is a much higher, ruggeder section. So we'll put up this cover image here while we move over to the video.
Only one sky, sometimes in blue and sometimes gray. Only one sky can hold the stars in just this way.
Well, here I am in the Catskills. I'm at North Lake, South Lake Campground. This is the 26th of August, and taking a little retreat by myself, coming out here. I've wanted to come here for many years. Actually, I haven't been hiking in the Catskills per se since I was in college. It's surprising because I did so much hiking here in the 60s. And I've always wanted to come and camp at this campsite, and this was the, nearby was the location of the Kaaterskill Mountain House back in the 1800s, and I guess early part of the 1900s. And Laurel House and Hotel Kaaterskill, something like that. These were, this was the place where the Hudson River School of Painting got started, particularly attributed to Thomas Cole and Frederick Church and Durand and others. And anyway, it's a beautiful place. There's trails all around here. You can walk to Artist Rock, Sunset Rock, Inspiration Point, Boulder Rock. The escarpment trail starts here and winds around on the edge of the mountains and goes up to, well, north of here, up the Blackhead Mountain area, far north of here. I didn't go that far, I just stayed in the area around here on local trails. So anyway, it's been a contemplative time, a little cool, late August, chilly nights, but actually good hiking weather. So it didn't get too hot, and beautiful sunny blue skies you'll see in my pictures. So anyway, here I am. Well, you know, it's my father and I came hiking here when I was in high school a whole lot, and I did some more in college, but mostly in high school. I don't know how many mountains we hiked here. We'd take day trips up and climb all these mountains, and so it's in part sort of reminiscing about him and maybe being with him in my heart a little bit that I come here. And yeah, so I'll show you some of my pictures. I'm up here at the Kaaterskill Mountain House site, and I thought that I might get the sunrise, but I was too late. Met some other guy that almost got it, but it's still pretty up here. Amazing mist in the valley, and you can hear the sounds from the valley. You hear dogs bark. You can hear the traffic down in Palinville and probably Catskill, and I think I can even hear the New York Thruway. There's a dull roar in the background, and although it's hidden by hills between here and the Hudson. But anyway, so it's a beautiful morning up here. This site that was where the Kaaterskill Mountain House was, very large hotel. It's one of the places where the Hudson River School of Painters got started. And it's not a school like you went to school, but it's a style of painting and people that learn from each other. Some influences from Europe, but one of the first distinctively American styles of painting that was very popular in the 19th century. And yeah, you can see why. It's a lovely place. It's incredible, these mountains, and drops off to the Hudson Valley here, about 1,500 feet or so, and you get up to the, I was looking yesterday at Kaaterskill High Peak, which is over 3,500 feet high, and so that means its descent to the Hudson is 3,000 feet. That's dramatic. And then just a little further north here along the Escarpment Trail are the Blackhead Mountains, Black Dome, Blackhead Mountain. We're nearly 4,000 feet, so you've got nearly
4,000 feet to drop to the actual Hudson, and into the valley below here is about 500 feet. So yeah, anything here that drops down to sea level if you go all the way to the Hudson. So that's pretty dramatic. I'm planning to go over to the other side of the Hudson today and go to Alana State Historic Site, which was the mansion of Frederick Church, who was one of the famous Hudson River School painters. And I think he was I think I read that he's the only actual student of Thomas Cole who is credited with starting the whole tradition, although I think there was someone else before him. And so it has supposed to have a spectacular view of the mountains here, so I definitely want to make sure I get that. Hopefully the mist will have risen from around the valley over there. By the time I get there, I expect it will have, the sun will have burned it off. So here we are, and enjoy.
As the brochure from Alana State Historic Site reads, Alana was home, studio, and estate of the Hudson River School artist Frederick Edwin Church, who lived from 1826 until 1900 and was one of the most important artists in American history. There he developed a three-dimensional work of art, a totally integrated environment embracing architecture, art, and landscape, unmatched by any other 19th century American property. The 126-acre farm was distinguished by its views of the Hudson Valley, the Kaaterskill Mountains, and the Taconic Hills to the east. Back across the river, the escarpment trail begins by following the north rim of Kaaterskill Clove, a deep canyon running east to the Hudson Valley between Kaaterskill High Peak and South Mountain, just south of North and South Lake in the Kaaterskill Mountain House area. The trail winds around the corner to the north and follows the brink of the escarpment, or long cliff, that marks the eastern edge of the Kaaterskill mountain range above the valley. It passes by the site of the old Kaaterskill Mountain House. All three of the luxury hotels of the Kaaterskill area from the 19th century are gone today. Continuing north along the escarpment trail, there are a number of views over the Hudson Valley, including Artist's Rock, one of the places popular with landscape painters. Thomas Cole wrote in 1841, "Must I tell you that neither the Alps nor the Apennines, no, not even Etna itself, have dimmed in my eyes the beauty of our own Catskills? It seems to me that I look on American scenery, if it were possible, with increased pleasure. It has its own peculiar charm, a something not found elsewhere. I am content with nature. Would that I were with art." Much of the rock of the Kaaterskill Mountains is what is known as conglomerate, containing pebbles and stones once along rivers or along the shore of an ancient sea. The accumulation of thousands of feet of stones, silt, clay, and sand in the sea compress the sediments into stone or sedimentary rocks. The source of all these materials was long-gone mountains, mostly in New England, that eroded away, filling a sea that covered much of New York and Pennsylvania. Geologists call this long wedge of sedimentary layers the Catskill Delta. It turns out that Ithaca is part of the Catskill Delta, Rocks around Taganic Falls and the Finger Lakes were sediments deposited in this ancient sea as well. The thickest part of the delta wedge is the Kaaterskill Mountains themselves. My final exploration of the area was of Kaaterskill Clove itself. Kaaterskill is an old Dutch version of the name Catskill. Cat or Kater probably refers to wildcats in the mountains, possibly mountain lions. Kill means creek, and a clove is a canyon or mountain pass. Kaaterskill Clove was one of the earliest wilderness tourist destinations in America and is the site of one of America's earliest folk tales, the Story of Rip Vanwinkle. As one source writes, Rip Vanwinkle is a short story by the American author Washington Irving, published in 1819, as well as the name of the story's fictional protagonist. Written while Irving was living in Birmingham, England, it was part of a collection entitled The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon. Although the story is set in New York's Catskill Mountains, Irving later admitted, "When I wrote the story, I had never been on the Catskills." The story of Rip Vanwinkle is set in the years before and after the American Revolutionary War. Rip Vanwinkle, a villager of Dutch descent, lives in a nice village at the foot of New York's Catskill Mountains. An amiable man whose home and farm suffer from his lazy neglect, he is loved by all but his wife. One autumn day he escapes his nagging wife by wandering up the mountains. After encountering strangely dressed men rumored to be the ghosts of Henry Hudson's crew, who were playing ninepins, and after drinking some of their liquor, he settles down under a shady tree and falls asleep. He wakes up 20 years later and returns to his village. He finds out that his wife is dead and his close friends have died in a war or gone somewhere else. He immediately gets in trouble when he hails himself a loyal subject of King George III, not knowing that in the meantime the American Revolution has taken place. An old local recognizes him, however, and Rip's now-grown daughter eventually puts him up. The Rip Vanwinkle Bridge crosses the Hudson near the village of Catskill. New York State Route 23A winds up Kaaterskill Clove from the Hudson Valley. It follows Kaaterskill Creek, the banks of which rise steeply to the heights above. Most of the way up the canyon, a gorge enters on the right, cut by Lake Creek pouring down from North and South Lake, up behind South Mountain. Half a mile up this gorge is one of America's most celebrated waterfalls, Kaaterskill Falls. The waterfalls was a favorite subject of the Hudson River School painters. Laurel House, one of the hotels of the area, was perched not far from the brink of the cataract. It was said that visitors in the amphitheater below the falls could have lunch and champagne lowered to them from a platform by the lip of the falls. Originally, the Laurel House was a more modest guest house where many artists and writers visiting the area would stay. In Rip Vanwinkle, Washington Irving described the falls. At length he reached to where the ravine had opened through the cliffs to the amphitheater, but no traces of such an opening remained. The rocks presented a high, impenetrable wall, over which the torrent came tumbling in a sheet of feathery foam, and fell into a deep, broad basin, black from the shadows of the surrounding forest. Irving's description enticed Thomas Cole and other painters to explore Kaaterskill Clove. Asher Brown Durant painted this scene of Kaaterskill Clove in 1849. Perhaps his most famous work, it is both landscape and commemorative portrait. Entitled Kindred Spirits, it depicts the artist Thomas Cole standing beside the romantic poet William Cullen Bryant. Bryant wrote a poem entitled Kaaterskill Falls. Midst greens and shades the Kaaterskill leaps, from cliffs where the woodflower clings. All summer he moistens his verdant steeps with the sweet light spray of the mountain springs. And he shakes the woods on the mountainside when they drip with the rains of autumn tide.
But when in the forest bare and old the blast of December calls, he builds in the starlight clear and cold a palace of ice where his torrent falls, with turret and arch and fretwork fair, and pillars blue as the summer air. Those interested in superlatives might ask, what is the tallest waterfall in New York State? Folks in the Finger Lakes area have long held that Teganic Falls is the tallest, plunging 215 feet in a single drop. Kaaterskill Falls plunges in two distinct steps, 180 feet above and 80 feet below, totaling 260 feet, leading to the claim that it is the tallest waterfall in New York State. Meanwhile, people south of Rochester point to 350 feet high Inspiration Falls that splashes down the side of the Genesee River Gorge in Letchworth State Park, though it flows only at times of heavy rain. Regardless of which cataract deserves highest honor, Kaaterskill Falls' place in our cultural history is legendary.
Only one sky, sometimes in blue and sometimes gray. Only one sky can hold the stars.
Okay, so that was from a series that I had on Channel 13 Pegasus 5 years ago. I actually had it for maybe 3 years or so, called Nature Nearby. And that song was sung by my friend Will Feudeman. It was a guy named Hardy, I forget his last name, that actually wrote it, Only One Sky, very beautiful. Any case, let's come on back to Ithaca and the Finger Lakes. Isn't it interesting that the rocks of the Finger Lakes are actually, as you learned in that video, part of the Catskills, part of this long wedge of sedimentary rock that was deposited in the ancient sea millions of years ago. That was called the Catskill Delta. So it thins westward. Here it's about 1.5 miles thick, and the Catskills is about 3 miles thick, and over in Cleveland it thins out to maybe 3,000 feet thick or something like that. This is on the rim of a gorge in Ithaca near Buttermilk Falls State Park, and so we'll get back to Ithaca here. And just recently, the wildflowers, well, I'll see, look at the recent wildflower. This is dogwood, of course. It's a tree, blooming tree, of course, and we're all familiar with dogwood. You're probably mostly familiar with it as an ornamental plant, and sometimes you can see even pink dogwood, which is what they call a cultivar. But the native dogwood, which is Cornus florida is its Latin name, flowering dogwood, you do find it up on some of these dry ridges and so forth. It's the state tree, I guess, of Virginia, and state flower or state tree. But the flowering dogwood has declined a bit from a disease, a fungus disease called anthracnose, which I guess has been more of a devastating problem farther south, where there is a lot more dogwood than, say, it is here, but I think it has declined around here as well. So we're going to stay up on that ridge and take a look at a couple of other plants. Now, last time I took us just at the very end of the show to look at this somewhat nondescript little plant along the same ridge up on a rim dry ridge, and we'll zoom in a little more closely. And then I went back just the other day and looked at it, and the flower buds were opening, and these little flowers were there. This is I mainly like this plant because of its weird name. It's called bastard toadflax. Toadflax, Toadflax, bastard toadflax. What a weird name. It gets a big chuckle on a nature hike. But I looked it up a little bit, and it's actually not a true toadflax. I guess there is I don't know, it was a genus or a family of plants called toadflaxes. I'm not sure how they got their name. I think one explanation, maybe toads would hide in their foliage or something. It was kind of a myth, obviously. But so a bastard toadflax would mean a false toadflax, bastard meaning false rather than the more modern, less nice meaning. So yeah, so now we're gonna step down into the gorge. This is Buttermilk Glen in the gorge a little bit. Take a look what's going on there. So here's a cliff along the gorge trail in Buttermilk Glen. I don't know if you can make out. You look at that big tree in the center there rising up the top, and just to the, well, you can see there's a branch. No, that's not a branch. It's just a dark area in the cliff to the left of the upper part of the tree, and there's a little red spot there, and that little red spot is wild columbine, which is blooming this time of year, and it likes to grow on rocky ledges, particularly if there's some sunny rocky ledges. So some places it grows in great profusion, but keep your eyes out for wild columbine. Very pretty plant. And then another one that's getting going here. Now this is looking right down off a ledge into the water in Buttermilk Glen, and that plant that is arching along, what looks like arching right along the rock, but it's above it, is a fern. Those are ferns there that you commonly find in the gorges, called bulblet fern. And I'm sure during the summer I will show other pictures of bulblet ferns. Has its name bulblet because later in the summer it actually produces little bulbs underneath the fern frond, the fern leaf, and that's the principal way probably that it reproduces, although it does produce spores. So watch for the bulblet fern. And many, many other plants that are blooming now. There's a long parade of wildflowers in the woods and in the fields, probably more in the fields as we get farther in the season. As the woods get shadier and shadier and less light for plants, most of the woodland wildflowers get their blooming done before the canopy closes in overhead, and then there's less energy for the plant. So now we'll look right into the gorge itself. Here's a waterfall. Actually, this was taken before we've had all the recent rain, so there's a lot more water coming across it. And this is, now we have this hot weather. Folks are going into our gorges and enjoying the cool pools there, which is fine, but except for the fact that it's dangerous. And here in the state parks, it's particularly forbidden because there have been drownings, terrible tragedies in some of these pools, particularly when people dive into them. And then when the water gets higher, like it is now, you can actually have vertical eddies where the water goes over a pool that may even be hidden, a depression in the rock, or and has a downward circulating eddy and can pull you under, and you can't get back up. And the base of waterfalls are particularly dangerous that way, and they will recirculate and can overpower you when the water is high particularly. So don't go swimming in these pools. There is the gorge swimming pool at the lower Robert H. Treman State Park, and at some point in the summer I imagine they'll get the Buttermilk Falls swimming area going as well. So that's about all we have for today, and we'll see you again next week, and maybe you can get out and enjoy the places like the Catskills and some of our other fantastic landscape in New York State and elsewhere away from Ithaca, as well as the incredible places we have here. Almost need to go nowhere. So long for now, and we'll see you soon.